I think there's a lot of different paths. I think if you're struggling and want to put out more personal work, this could be a path for you. Like this could be a path that would work. If you're like, oh man, I'm putting out as much personal work as I want and everything's great, then keep jamming, doing whatever. But if you're like somebody who's like, oh man, I really wish I was putting out more personal work, I wish I was able to devote more time to learning something, then I think this could definitely be like a path for you.
Hey hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey hatchlings, welcome to episode 50 of the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm pretty excited. I hope we can get some party horns or something like that on the sound effects. I can't believe it. We made it to episode 50. And today we have Mike Winkleman on the show, aka Beeple. We talked about a lot of things on this podcast and we tried to do a rapid fire round. It wasn't so rapid, but it was a lot of fun. We did talk about his everydays, but we also covered so many things like project fees versus day rates and some unexpected things like investing and saving your money to create freedom and options for yourself in your business. So before we get into the show, I just want to thank our sponsors Milanote. Milanote is a tool for organizing your motion graphics projects, everything from the creative brief, mood boards and storyboards, all your pre-production material that you need in one place. So I've been using it to organize this podcast and my projects since Evan Abrams told me about it from episode 47. And if you'd like to check out Evan's series on pre-production on Milanote, just head over to motionhatch.com/Milanote. Hey Mike, do you want me to call you Mike or Beeple?
Mike is fine. I mean, you can call me Beeple, but I feel like it's a little weird.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, since NAB, I listened to the podcast a bunch of times. I'm a hatchling, if you will. Isn't it? Hatchling?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like it. The guests have a lot more like business side of it, which I find really interesting, to be honest. So yeah, it's been cool to like hear the different guests and stuff. And I've actually reached out to one of them, and because he's from Atlanta. And
right,
so so it's been definitely cool.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that you referred to yourself as a hatchling. I'm going to use that. So, yeah, I wanted to do some like quick fire questions because this is going to be episode 50. So we're going to do some different things today just to make it a bit mix it up for people. So we're going to go through the questions and just answer them as quickly as you can. You don't really have to explain yourself too much if you don't want to, or you can.
Okay.
So what's your favorite failure?
Okay, that's like a rapid fire question. That's like, I thought it was going to be like, what's your favorite color?
No,
don't think about it.
Well, I think it's better if you don't think about it. We could put that in the interview later if you have to think about it.
Can you just like immediately say that?
Yeah, maybe not. It's going really well so
far. Favorite failure. I feel like every day I fail at like keeping myself on task. Like that's my favorite failure right now. Like I don't know if I'd say favorite because it's like very much a failure. So, but I feel like I'm just very distracted. Like I don't know. That's off the top of my head. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, that's good. So this is more rapid fire. If you had one book that you could recommend to people, what would it be?
The War of Art.
Okay, good. What's your favorite person to follow on Instagram?
I do like that. If I had to follow just one account, I do like that. It's like an aggregator account, but that Empire of the Future has like a lot of like good sci-fi stuff that I like.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Empire
good.
of the Future.
So what would you do if you weren't an artist?
I don't know, probably be very poor, and I don't know, like it wouldn't be good. I'm a programmer, I guess. I went to school for programming, so I guess I'd be a programmer, which would be very boring and I would hate.
Yeah.
That's what I would do.
So do you have a favorite quote or saying?
Not really, to be honest. I don't.
That's fine. So if you couldn't put everydays out on social media, what would you do with them?
I would just put them on my website. That's what I was doing before social media. I just put them on my website. Nobody would see them, and everybody would just go on with their life. But I feel like I would still try to release them in some public forum, because I feel like before I was releasing them publicly, and again, when I first started in 2007, it was just on my website for probably the first year at least, maybe 2 years. Before I was releasing them publicly, I would release them, or I would just do them in my like notebook, and then it would like if I knew nobody was gonna see it, like it would just be much easier to just like completely phone it in, because it's like whatever, nobody's gonna see this. Who gives? Yeah, if I did it, like, and this was when I was doing drawing, so I feel like releasing it to the public is a big part of like will hold you more accountable to like try, because it's gonna be like embarrassing if you just like do something like super. So I
Yeah.
think that is a big piece of it, is fear of embarrassment.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like we're like a risk of getting off the rapid fire question. So I'm gonna
Sorry.
carry on. No,
Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna keep it rapid.
No, we can come back to that, but I feel like we
Sure,
should
sure.
carry on with that, and then maybe we should talk more about that in a bit. So,
Okay.
do you have a favorite TV show?
Favorite TV show right now that we're watching? I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but that Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Oh, right. Okay. I'll check that out.
It's okay.
Cool.
I wouldn't. It's not my favorite, but it's my favorite right
Well,
now.
what's your favorite all-time one?
All time? I mean, maybe like Simpsons, I guess. Although I hate the new episodes of Simpsons. The Office, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, all time, because it's like drama and comedy are kind of like maybe The Office, the American Office, not your stupid British Office.
Yeah, but the British one was the original one.
I can't understand it. I can't understand how they're saying, like, talking.
Yeah, but
Like,
well, okay, so that
I don't know. I can understand you fine, but I cannot understand that.
well, that's
like it's
why
like they're speaking another language.
it's for a UK audience, isn't it? So obviously, like, that's why we find it funny and stuff. But I guess like
I love Ricky Gervais, but I can't understand it. Maybe I would now. Maybe that was like years ago. It's like, okay, you can understand it.
yeah. Do you mean like the language, or you mean like
the language?
jokes?
Yeah, like literally, no, like literally the
Oh, right.
language. It's like, what did they just say? Like, I think because it's like super subtle, like I can't even understand what he just said, and I probably could understand it now.
Yeah, you could put the subtitles on though. That's what we do
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's I could. Okay, rapid fire.
Yeah, this is not working. So, what do you say no to, or what have you been better at saying no to recently?
I say no to a lot. I say no to almost everything.
Cool. So, do you have any weird habits
uh,
apart from doing work every day that you put on social media? That's pretty weird.
that's very weird. Not really. I guess if that's weird, it doesn't seem that weird to me. But I guess if that's weird,
Well,
then that's my weird habit.
Well, yeah, making something that of like that caliber, I think every day is kind of weird. But yeah, you can. Have you got another
that's
one?
probably my only weird thing, then, I
guess. Okay. If someone wanted to be the next Beeple, what would you say to them?
Say you could definitely be the next Beeple. Just start doing it every day. And I think everybody should be the next Beeple. You should start doing it every day.
So yeah, I mean that's the end of my rapid fire questions that weren't so rapid, but it's good to test these things out, like.
Sure.
Yeah, well, that's like an interesting way to start off as well, I guess, because I think personally that it's super hard to do work every day, and you obviously don't think that, like not work, but like personal work, right? That you put on social media, that you weren't good enough to do that. But you're like obviously like doing this, you've been doing this for years. So is it your perspective that other people can and should do this? Or are you like, yeah, it depends on the person? Like,
yes and no. Everybody absolutely can do it. Like, for sure they can do it. Should they do it? That's another like yes and no. Most of the artists that I follow and like really respect their work and I'm inspired by their work don't do every days. Almost none of them do. I think there's a lot of different paths. I think if you're struggling and want to put out more personal work, this could be a path for you. Like this could be a path that would work. So if you're like, oh man, I'm putting out as much personal work as I want and everything's great, then keep jamming, doing whatever. But if you're like somebody who's like, oh man, I really wish I was putting out more personal work, I wish I was able to devote more time to learning something, then I think this could definitely be like a path for you. It's kind of a mix of both. Like don't want to act like this is the only path and that everybody should absolutely do this, but I also think that it could help a lot of people.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think like it makes me think about, because obviously now you're doing this and like freelance stuff and things like that. But when you first started doing dailies, obviously I think you were doing like web design or something. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I had a job doing web design for a company in Wisconsin, a very small town. And so, in the first year, I did drawing because I wanted to get better at drawing. And then after that, transitioned to Cinema 4D and a couple other things, but mostly Cinema 4D.
In terms of other people trying to do this stuff and like pursuing putting out more work and stuff like that, like back then, how were you managing your time? I'm guessing it looks very different to how you do it now.
Not really, to be honest. It's just sort of like I usually do it at the end of the day because it will take up sort of as much time. And that's when I usually did it before. Occasionally, I guess I would do it during the middle of the day more. I don't think I was spending quite as much time with it each day back when I like first started. Like, I think there was a lot of days where it was maybe only like a half hour. It was definitely less of a priority back then. And as it's grown, that it's sort of like, okay, well, this is kind of like my thing now. I've devoted more time to it each day. In terms of like what's changed, it's sort of like 12 years ago or whatever, it was something that I woke up in the morning and it was like, okay, when am I going to do this? I have to do this. And today it's like, wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, this is something I have to do today, no matter what else I do today. And it's like, it's also in those 12 years, it was like, okay, this is kind of like really the only thing I have to do today.
Right.
Like I have to eat and live, but this is literally the only thing. It's actually way more like important than any of the client work or anything else. If I had a choice between meeting a client deadline and doing it every day, which would never happen because I would never put myself in a position where I had to choose between the two. But if it did, I would absolutely 100% choose the every day, and the client would be like, whatever. Like I don't, because I put myself in a position financially where I can make this the absolute priority. So not that much has changed in terms of like how I sort of like structure things, I guess.
I can see that, but it's like, do you have like a concept of most people aren't in that position? And like, how did you get yourself in that position? And when was there like a flip at one point where you were like, well, this is successful. This is what I'm known for. This is obviously the priority. Or like, was it like when you got past a certain number or?
I don't think there was ever like a time where it was like, okay, this is like a priority. It was always like, that's what I'm partially what I'm trying to say is it was always a priority even back then. Like, even like become less of a like choice. But even I feel like after the first maybe 3 months, that it was like, okay, I'm gonna like stick with this. And then after that, it was like, well, I've been doing this like 3 months. Like, I want to keep going with this. So it's sort of like there was never like, oh, I'm gonna do this for 12 years. It was I was just always looking at how much I'd already done after a pretty small number and been like, okay, well, I've already done it like this much. Like, let's keep this going. And it was a priority. It didn't take like 5 years of doing it before it's like this is a priority. It was, you think about it, if you do something for a year, even like it's gonna be like, okay, well, I did it for a year. Like, should I really like break the streak today just for like nothing? Just because I don't feel like it. So it became a
Right.
priority pretty quick. And in terms of what allowed me to make it like a bigger priority over like say client work is like saving money, investing money, and like living well within my means, which we were doing even 12 years ago. My wife and I were saving a good deal of our income and living in a house that was much cheaper than what we could afford, driving absolute garbage cars. I have a car outside still with 285,000 miles on it. So, I mean, this is a car that's going on 20 years old. It's an absolute piece of shit, but I don't want to or really need to like get something better, even though I absolutely could afford to get something better because wanting to live well within the money that I make is like very important. It gives you a lot of options. And that's what I think people don't recognize. They see money as, oh, you can buy things. And it's like, well, really what money does is it gives you options to say no to things, to turn things down, to do your own work. It's very hard to like communicate that to people because, and people are I think more drawn to the things that money you can buy that you can see.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like it's like a car. Well, you could post a new picture on Instagram of your sweet car or your awesome vacation or your blah blah blah. Whereas you can't post a picture on Instagram of your like options. You know what I mean? Like so I think it like makes it a less like sexy choice for money and something that people don't maybe understand about money.
Trying to achieve like financial freedom a little bit. Is that always like a mindset that you had?
Yes, and I had a couple. Well, my dad is very cheap, and so that was definitely like he was very much like taught us to like very much the difference between a need and a want. That was a big thing very early on. And then I had a couple of other friends back in Wisconsin who were it's called FIRE, like financial independence, retire early, and that's like a whole community of people who are trying to retire like much earlier, like 30, 40, like, and be able to live off of that for the rest of their life through investments and whatnot. So those guys were really into that and they like, exposed me to that sort of like community and like some of the things that they were teaching and doing and stuff like that. So that was another thing that I think really sort of like helped me.
You do some investing and stuff like that. I mean, I don't, this is something that I'm totally not good at or like aware of very much, but I just think that's kind of interesting.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that I think it would be good to talk about on the podcast is because I think there's a lot of people who like talk about passive income
Hmm.
of like you build something and then there's like you get passive income from it. And to me, that's not passive income at all because it's really like spec work because you built something and then you hope people are going to buy it, but people might not buy that. And then you just kind of wasted all that time. So it's really like just making something and it took you a bunch of time to make that thing. That didn't take like no time. So you put in a bunch of work and you might get nothing from that work. To me, that's not passive income. Investments are passive income because I made that money. I'm just going to put it in a thing and
Yeah.
I'm not going to do anything and it will keep bringing me money in. People looking for sources of passive income, I think graphic designers are very quick to like, I'm going to build an asset pack or I'm going to build this thing or I'm going to build blah, blah, blah and hope that'll sell. But chances are that's not going to sell forever. A new plugin might come out or something, or they change the software or whatever, and your like thing you built is worthless now. It's not something that's going to bring in money forever, and it's not really like passive. You had to do a bunch of work to like build that thing, and then you have to promote it. That's another thing that I don't think people talk about is because
Right.
one of the things with social media is I really try to not promote as much as possible because that's not really in a lot of ways like providing depending on what it is. If you're trying to promote you're trying to sell, you're not in many ways providing value to people to want to follow you because you're trying to sell them something versus just giving them entertainment, giving them information in the form of like a tutorial or whatever. You're like giving versus trying to like take something from them. That's another thing. If you build something, you have to really like promote it or nobody's going to know about it. So that's another like cost to like doing something like that. So I think investing is very much something that a lot of designers overlook and could be like a really viable source of passive income. If you're not like in crazy volatile investments, could be very pretty steady. You know what I mean?
I think that's good advice. And but I think from my point of view would be like, don't not pursue the kind of other revenue streams like that aren't your clients and just do investing. I would say pursue that as well, but then like know that it is like a temporary thing, like what you're saying, and then use that money that you get from those products or whatever and invest that maybe. That would
Sure.
probably be my advice. And then also there's other things in there like, oh, you don't know, and you could spend a bunch of time doing stuff and then put it out and no one wants it. And that is also true. But like in my experience, you could also like pre-sell stuff. Like I've done that before. Like when I want to make something, I'd be like, does anyone want it? If you want it, let me know. Put your money down and I'll make it. We did that for the contract bundle.
If I was going to go down the route of making something, I would definitely do something like that to gauge the market and be like, does anybody even want this before I spend all this time making this?
Yeah, exactly.
Is anybody gonna find this like valuable? Like, I think that's a very, very smart way to go about building a product like that. And again, I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying like this is another avenue that like if you're looking for something passive could be, and you maybe don't have an idea of anything else to make, like just try saving some of the money and investing.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really good to mention. We haven't really talked about that on the show before, so I think that's really great.
When I go out to conferences and I like talk to people about stuff like that, you could just see people's eyes just glaze over, and it's just like I'm just talking through them into the ether, like almost everybody. Like there's very, very few people I've gone to conferences and talked, and it's not just like, yeah, no, that's cool. And it's just like, okay, you're like literally just, I'm talking to like a wall. So I think it's definitely something that there's not, especially for people getting older, in this industry, like there's
Hmm.
usually not a bunch of like benefits and stuff in terms of like retirement, pensions, and all this crap. Like that's just not a part of this industry. So that's another thing to kind of take into account.
Yeah, and like most people I think I talked to aren't saving for a private pension or doing even any of those things, never mind like investing on top of that and saving money and stuff. So I think that's like one thing just to start with as well.
Sure, sure. Yeah, for sure.
Like that's like the at the very least I guess people should be thinking about. But yeah, people definitely aren't thinking about this stuff. What they tend to be thinking about is like, I'm freelance, I don't know where the next project is coming from, I just should work on every single project because I'm kind of scared that work's going to disappear. And they kind of have this kind of desperate mindset. I feel like, like what you're saying is if you be a bit smarter about your money and invest some of it and like, yeah, like make some money, but then you can be more choosy about your clients and stuff as well.
100%. Like that's where you get into this kind of like trap of taking on projects where you're like, okay, this is sketchy as shit. Like, I don't know if they're gonna pay, or their demands are super weird, or it's last second and it's just not gonna be good. It's gonna be really, really like not a good project and not be worth my time, and it's gonna be a big headache. But if you are like completely stretched thin where you have no choice but to take that project, well, then obviously you have to take that project. So I think eating out less or moving to a cheaper apartment, having a crappier car, buying less clothes, like those are all things like to a degree people can do to save money. So I think anything you can do to give yourself a buffer so that when that crappy job comes up, you do not have to say yes. That choice, that's where again the choice has already been made. You made the choice when you went out and bought that car to take this crappy job, because it's like I made that choice and now I have no choice because I don't have a choice. I need to do this or I'm going to lose my car, I'm going to lose my apartment, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's where money can give you choices to say no to things or say yes to a personal work or say yes to putting out some sort of like product. When you don't have to take a job, it also puts you in a stronger bargaining position when you're talking about quoting a job. And
Yeah.
because you're sort of like, I don't have to have this. It's kind of like, well, it'd be nice, but this is how much it is. So take it or leave it. Like you'll be more confident quoting it if you don't absolutely have to do that job.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think we were talking to EJ on the podcast about it, like when you like have a lot of work and stuff and you're like this extra project comes along and you're like, I don't actually want to do that. I'm just going to like say a silly price,
Yeah.
and then the client actually says yes. And you're like, huh, okay, maybe I could just say if that's not so much of a silly price and I could just say that in general. And I think that's like the difference about coming from this kind of mindset of like, I have enough, like an
Yeah.
abundance mindset. I've got like enough money and I don't need, like, absolutely need this work. And I feel like
If
that's the
you need
difference.
something, yeah, you will not throw out a huge number. You will like throw out like, okay, well, what am I gonna get? What am I gonna say to like make sure they definitely like take me on this?
Yeah. And I think, like charging more is like a really important thing because then you can kind of do things like what I was doing a lot when I was doing more freelance work was, like work for a few months and then like take a month off, like to do stuff with Motion Hatch or to go traveling and things like that, because that's what I felt like was important to me. And having more money wasn't important. Like, I could have got that work, but I said no because I was like, I don't actually need more money than that. I'm quite happy with what I got. Doing some traveling or working on this podcast and stuff, that's more important.
Sure, sure. It gave you the option to be able to turn down work and work on something else that might be better long term, or just take a break and, if you want to learn something or whatever, or travel or do whatever, like, yeah, it just gives you those options.
There's just not enough people doing that and not enough people talking about it. I just feel like I can just see the desperation in like a lot of people, and it makes me sad because it's hard to like get started and get to that, but then once you realize that you don't need to work all the hours under the sun, and yeah, maybe that one time when you said that you're going to travel for a month and then like your favorite client came along with what you thought might be your favorite project, you might miss out on that, but actually like you don't know, it might have been like a crap project or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely what's always somewhat like of a paradox that it's sort of like people, and this is very much like the US. And again, this is very much like kind of like a developed country sort of mentality. Like if you're in like India or China or something like that, me being like, you should save your money and blah, blah, blah. It's sort of like, I fully recognize that's a little like, it's coming from a, privileged position, me being able to like say that it's like, yeah, just save your money.
Yeah.
Some people don't have that like option, like for sure. But what's always kind of ironic to me is like, if everybody did save their money a lot more, like the economy wouldn't be like growing as fast because it's growing because people like spend every single like dollar that they have on like new cars and new blah blah blah, new phones and new da, 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 da. And that like kind of like pushes the economy like forward much quicker than if everybody was kind of like, nah, I don't need that. I'm just gonna save my money. Like that would really like slow the economy down quite a bit. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird paradox, but yeah, as a person, as an individual person, you should save your
I agree with that. So this kind of plays into some of the things that I wanted to ask you about. So on your site, on your resources section, you like give away a lot of project files and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of people, especially if they're in your position, would feel like scared of doing that. You seem to be like, take whatever you want. And that's kind of the impression that I get from you, and kind of willing to give people stuff and that your projects and stuff. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh no, this is my work, I must hold on to it very tightly. And like as well in like the teaching kind of way as well, like, oh, I mustn't tell anyone how I do this because then everyone will do it and then I won't be, which is also coming from like a scarcity kind of mindset.
I can't release as much now because I'm using all these like Turbo Squid models and all these assets and things that I don't own that I can't just like give out.
Yeah.
So I probably will be releasing drastically less project files moving forward because I use so many assets. The stuff that I released in the past is kind of like, to be honest, like understood that mentality of like keeping project files for, especially for like short films or stuff like that, or like things that you've already rendered out, because it's like I'm never going to go back to that. It doesn't really hurt me at all to like release that project file because it has no value to me. I feel like people like, I've had a lot, oh, it's so nice of you to do that. To me, it doesn't really seem that nice of me or like kind of me or generous of me, because it's like it has no value to me because I've already done it. And it's sort of like the things that I find to be much more like selfless or like generous are people who like take time to make a tutorial about something they spent a bunch of time to learn. And then they're going to like spend even more time to make a tutorial that really doesn't kind of like benefit them at all because they already know how to do it. Like teaching me how to do it, you know what I mean? In a way, it benefits them,
Yeah.
but it doesn't benefit them directly by spending, hours putting together this tutorial to teach me how to do it. Versus like me uploading the project files, I just zip it up and throw it on the website. And if anybody has gone through my project files, they know I'm not like organizing everything. It's just like, that's done up. It's really like almost no work for me. I wish I could release more of the stuff that I have, because to me, if people can get something from it, like great, because it costs me nothing and it like benefits me in terms of like exposure and this and that. So to be honest, I never really understood the mindset of not wanting to release everything that you could.
Some people sort of think, well, yeah, but that's your process. Like maybe someone could take something from that and like, I don't know.
But to be honest, yeah, they could maybe, but it's sort of like, are you really going to keep doing that same thing over and over? Like, I don't know. Like, it seems like, especially like that's most things are like kind of like one off solutions. So
Right.
it's sort of like, you're not going to do that exact same thing again. And if somebody wants to like copy that exact same thing, like, I guess they could, but a lot of times they could just look at it and figure out something pretty close too. So it's sort of like, or to be quite honest, if they really wanted to like super copy it nowadays, they'll just take it. They'll just take your video and post it. So it's sort of like a weird, unnecessary concern that maybe you're like putting too much importance on your work, which I think is maybe another discussion. But
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, I mean, I guess similarly, you have like, I notice you have free Creative Commons visuals like posted on your bio on your Instagram. Like, what does that kind of mean to you? Because you haven't put anything about like commercial use attribution, stuff like that. I'm just wondering how you deal with that kind of thing with the dailies and stuff in general. And I know that you've like licensed some of the images to clients and stuff.
and that's how I mainly got freelance work starting out, was because of those VJ clips. And the VJ clips I put up under Creative Commons, free for like any use, commercial use, whatever. And so VJs started using them, and they were getting used quite a bit. And then people started contacting me for like custom concert visuals and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I really like, for the first many years of doing freelance work, was doing almost entirely concert visuals. In that respect, it greatly benefited me because it gave me a bunch of like freelance work and allowed me to like do freelance full time and be able to quit the web design job. But beyond that, it's sort of like big companies in terms of like licensing, like big companies right now. I purposely keep it a little vague on my site. I don't have legal documents on the site.
Yeah.
Like legally, you can just use it. I just say you can use it. For most people, they'll just use it because it's like, whatever, it said on the site I can use it, I can use it. But bigger companies, that's not good enough for them. They need a document signed. So basically it's like, okay, well, if you're a big enough company and this is like important enough to you that you need a document signed, well, then I'm going to charge you to like license that work.
Right, that
So
makes sense.
if you're somebody like Pepsi came to me and it was like, we want to use a bunch of these clips for like Shanghai Disney or something. And so it was like, okay, well, they were a big enough client that me saying, use them for whatever you want on the site, that's not good enough. We need these document signs saying that we can definitely use these. So in that case, then it's like, I'll charge a like licensing fee. So it's sort of like they're free for like, if you're just some kid who's like, I want to use this for my whatever, it's like, use it. But if you're like a big corporation who can afford to pay me, then yeah, I'm going to take your money.
Like most people don't think that, but I think what it comes back to again, because you're coming from like a place of, well, I've got enough money saved and stuff like that. I don't need to bother with these like little like requests where you might get like $1,000,
$100 or something
yeah,
like
exactly.
that. Yeah, like people will like, be like, oh, can I use this for like, $100 or whatever? It's like, just use it, okay. But even back then, like, and back when I started out, this is so dumb. I would sign those documents for free. People would, like, big companies
Really?
would mail me, and yes, that was very dumb. I would sign and be like, okay, here you go. And that was stupid. But for a long time, I did that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. That's just straight up stupid. That's not crazy. That's just straight up dumb as hell. Yeah, finally, I don't know when, at some point, I was like, wait a second, why am I? Because when you sign a document like that, I'm taking on liability.
Yeah.
Like, the whole reason is, okay, if something happens, we're going to come sue Mike. And so it's like, okay, not only am I giving you this for free, but then I'm also taking on the liability of however the hell you use it for nothing. So it's like, that was just absolutely dumb as hell. Very early on, I think I recognized that like the clips would be more valuable as a promotional tool than a selling them directly. because I saw how much you could get for selling VJ clips, and I don't believe there's very much money in that. I just don't think there's a lot of money to be had. It's like a race to the bottom,
Yeah.
and it's just not something that I think is sort of like sustainable or like a good use. And I looked at like, oh man, if I could, releasing these clips booked me for 5 days. It's like that's way more than I would make from these clips. So very early on, I recognized that they would be better giving them away and trying to use them as like a loss leader in terms of like promotion.
Do you feel like that's just specific to like doing like VJ clips and stuff like that? Or do you think that that sort of method could be like a viable thing for other people to think about doing?
It's for everything. It's for literally everything. Tutorials, podcasts. I mean, you could charge for this podcast. You could say, if you want to listen to this podcast, it's $5 of whatever.
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's like a balance to it where me signing those documents for big companies, that was just stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wasn't getting any promotion from it. In that case, take the money. I think there's a balance between giving to try and like, gain promotion, gain a following, blah blah blah, and when to charge for something and when to like, okay, well this is very very valuable, and maybe it's just valuable to a certain, again, maybe you just charge a certain group of people who can like afford it, and the rest of the people it's like free for it. So that's like kind of like Unity, I believe, is like that, and Unreal. Like if you're like a bigger studio, you have to pay a percentage of sales or a percentage of whatever. But if you're just some kid who's like, I want to make a whatever, then it's like, okay, we'll just take it, learn, blah, blah, blah. That can be applied to software, it can be applied to art, all types of art, music, tutorials, education. It can be applied to like just about any sort of content or information that could be a product. It could also be free, and you could get some level of promotion from that. It definitely does not just apply to VJ clips.
Yeah, I think for me, like obviously doing this podcast and stuff, in my eyes, try and give as much as away as you can for free and help people, and especially like in like teaching people stuff and things like that. And then, but then there's like a certain point where like if it costs you to make something, obviously it costs me to make this podcast because of time and editing and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm talking about like if it costs you like loads and loads and you're like paying other people and stuff like that, I feel like there are some stuff where you're like providing more value, but you sort of have like your free stuff and then you have your like more paid stuff, like if people want to do like more stuff, go deeper, all of that kind of thing. And I feel like that's a nice balance, because it's like, well, yeah, we've got the free stuff, like this is always free, this podcast is always free, blah blah blah, but like there's other stuff that is supporting doing this podcast, for example. Because of that, then we can do more and make more free stuff. And that's kind of where
100%.
the balance comes for me in this kind of thing. Because, the opposite to that is, like the Jewett guy, like the guy who made that is a French guy and he didn't charge for it. I feel like if he charged for that, he could have like done more updates and, done all this stuff. And now I feel like, maybe we should get him on this podcast to talk about it. But I just feel like he always wanted to do it for free and stuff like that, but I'm not convinced that was like the best way to go, because I feel like he could have provided a bit more support and stuff. And I think he's actually said that like on some articles I read and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's definitely a balance between selling things and giving them away for free, and there's so many sort of like factors in that, in terms of market expectations, your own financial situation matters a lot. The inherent value of what you're trying to sell or give away matters a lot. So I think there's no easy answers of should I sell this or should I give this away. It's like a case by case basis, a product by product basis. So maybe you should give it away for free for 2 weeks and then you should sell for it. There's a million different ways you can kind of like slice that now, and I don't know the right answer a lot of time, and there's so many variables.
yeah, so kind of along those lines, but like in terms of licensing your work and stuff, like do you have a process for that, or is there like a way that you're like working things out, or like did you learn that from somewhere? I think a lot of people are asking me questions about how you license stuff, so
I'm Not super good at that. I've had some pretty big screw ups in the past in terms of licensing stuff and forgetting that I license stuff. I'm probably not the authority to talk to on, intelligent best practices for licensing. I've got a slightly better system now, but I mean, I usually have a contract, or I always have a contract. I don't have like a manager or anything like that. It's definitely all just like me, companies or people or whoever coming to me being like, can we use this
Yeah.
for that? And that again is like a lot of times I will look at the company or the artist. Sometimes it's like different bands or artists or whatever. And I'll sort of determine what I believe they should be able to pay, or how valuable I think this is to them, and I will base the price on that. My prices are fairly like variable in terms of like, I also have like a lot of artwork, and it's sort of like that again makes it, I think, of a little bit of like a unique situation versus if you're somebody who like, a painter or something who paints 10 pictures a year, like year. Well, then I have no idea how the hell you would price that, or like, I don't, and I feel like I get it wrong a lot too. So I don't know. I don't feel like I'm like a super good authority on like
Yeah,
licensing
but
or,
it makes
you
sense
know
that
what I mean?
you'd basically do like value-based pricing, like you're doing it based on the value you think it provides that company and that sort of like the scale of the company and what they're using it for and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah, yeah. I guess when you say value-based pricing, it sounds a lot smarter than what I'm doing, which is just kind of like coming up with pulling a number out of my ass. Value-based pricing sounds much smarter. Yes, that's what I'll say moving
yeah,
forward. That's what
that's what
I'm
you
doing.
can say that. Yeah. Yeah, well that's what you're doing because you're basing it on the value that it has to the client. So
And that's to me what's interesting, because I've heard a lot of people say, and that's how I apply to licensing stuff, but that's how I also apply like my day rate or like project
yeah.
things. And that's where I hear a lot of people being like, never lower your rate. And it's sort of like, to me, that doesn't make sense. Like, I look at every project that I'm doing and I look at it like, what is this worth to that company? Or what do I think that company could afford to pay for this? So there's been things like I've done for like Apple where it's like a fairly ridiculous amount of money for the amount of work. And so it's like, sort of like, well, okay, I charged them that. Like, that's like my new rate for everybody? Like, I'm never going to lower between like that line. Like, that's the line now, where it's like that seems to me ridiculous. Like, that's not how it works. Like, when I hear people be like, you should never lower your rate, it's like, what? I don't understand what the hell they're talking about.
The lowering your rate thing, it's almost like you would have a minimum rather than like if you make something for a big company and you get loads of money that you have to always charge that. I think it's more like, well, I won't go below this rate because that's kind of like what I'm valuing my work at a minimum. That's kind of how I see the lower your rate
Sure.
thing.
Yeah, I guess I kind of see that. I guess I could kind of see that. I mean, that to me, like that minimum is sort of like, it's based on a lot of factors, though, I guess. But that's, to me, seems like a somewhat arbitrary number, like your
Well,
minimum.
it would be like a minimum day rate or something. So like I've worked on that kind of way before where I've been like, okay, like if people ask me what my day rate is, I'll be like, I would say one number and then I would kind of be hoping for the middle number, but then I wouldn't go below a number that was like £100 less or something. Do you see what I mean? Like you have like
Sure,
some
sure. Yeah.
fluctuation in, it's basically like you give yourself negotiating room, but you know when to say no. When people are talking about don't lower your rate, I think it's like if you've decided previously in your head that you have like a day rate and you don't want to go below that, I would say ask for more. So then you have some wiggle room. You know, because people always say, like, if you're
Yeah,
working
yeah.
more on a day rate, people are always trying to get you to do like the least rate possible, right? So they're always going to negotiate. And if they negotiate, I feel like you're kind of on the right mark. And if they don't negotiate, I feel like you're probably charging too low.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I do that all the time, constantly. Even the Apple thing, it was like, here's the thing. Okay,
You're like, damn, not enough money.
damn it. It's like, I thought it was a big number, but it's like, apparently that was not the number you had in your mind. So it was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get that all the time. And that's where I think a lot of people like struggle with it. And I think it's tough because there are no right
Yeah.
answers. Like, I just did like a workshop and people are like, well, what should I charge? And it's like, everybody in this room will charge a different amount because you're all at different skill levels, you're at different experience levels, you're working for different clients in different regions of the world. Like, there's no answer. Like, there's not like, this is what it is. That's why this is like a perpetual issue of what should I charge, because there is no easy answer. There is no right answer.
We should be working like to like, this is what I'm going to charge at a minimum, and then like work up from that as much as possible, basically. From what you were saying about like the Apple thing, when you're trying to quote like project rates to like direct to client and stuff, sometimes I've said like, hey, like normally animations cost like from this much to this much, and say like, like say quite a high number, but give them like a range. And then that if they're like, oh my God, well, yeah, we definitely don't have that, then you kind of know where you stand before you've actually like given them an estimate. Or if they're like, oh yeah, that's fine, then, you can like charge them the higher level of that range you kind of gave them and stuff like that.
I think that's definitely a good way to gauge their
Yeah.
ballpark. What I also try to do is I try to get them to throw out a number first and be like, what's your like rough budget? Because I could kind of scale this project up or down and see if I can at least get some ballpark, which sometimes works, but sometimes they'll act like it's like, oh, this is our budget. And it's like, come on, guys, that's not your budget. And then you just ignore that and just like, okay, well, here's the more realistic number. And then it's like, okay. And it's, 10 times what they said their budget was. And it's like, 2 emails ago, you just said your budget was this, and now suddenly we're talking 10 times, and now we're like going back and forth. So it's like, you can't always, don't take their number that they throw out as like the real number. You also have to have some idea in your head of like, okay, how big is this company? How important is this project? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I think it can help, but I think your method of throwing out a range, I think that's actually a great advice in terms of like, getting them to like
be more realistic,
sort of show tip their hand a little bit of like, test the waters of what their actual budget is.
I think so. But it only kind of works like more like if you're doing project fees and like direct to client, maybe like big agencies and stuff like that, I think.
Well, and to be honest, I really don't like doing that. Like, I actually rarely work like that. I usually like working day rate because to me, a day rate is much safer in terms of like a lot of the headaches that I feel like I constantly hear about like designers with like deadlines and with blah, blah, blah. And I never run into that stuff. I mean, I'm very clear up front in terms of like expectations and what I'm going to do and when I'm going to do it and when this is due and blah, blah, blah. And I don't take on those last second fire jobs. But also, I think with working like a day rate in terms of like changes, it's like, well, we could just make changes all you want. Like, if you want to just like, let's just make changes and we're just going to go in circles and who gives like, the day rate's just going to keep going and it's just going to keep costing you money. So let's just make changes. I don't care. It's not my money. Like, you're going to keep paying me because it's on a day rate. I really rarely do flat fee project based stuff just because I feel like to me, it's more stressful in terms of like, okay. And if I do, then I obviously specify a number of rounds of changes and revisions, blah, blah, blah. But to me, I would much rather just a day rate. I know exactly how long the project is. Okay, I'm going to work for you from this week to this week, blah, blah, blah. It's just, to me, much cleaner and like.
Yeah, simple. But especially with you, because I think you're quite fast at creating stuff. So isn't that kind of giving yourself like sometimes making it so you maybe earn less money because, if you did a project fee, you could potentially get more money, if that makes sense. Because you're like, you're not basing it on like how many days you're working or whatever. I feel like that's the only downside to that, basically, or the flip side.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's definitely trade-offs with any sort of one. But yeah, I think that's where like pricing your day rate appropriately to like sort of like make up for that, I think is where you can kind of like mitigate that somewhat.
Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of people were asking about the Louis Vuitton like collaboration, and they wanted to know how that came about. I know that you did the little article in School of Motion, but maybe you can just like say a brief version, then we'll link.
The Louis Vuitton thing, they just like emailed me out of the blue and were just like, we want to use like a bunch of pictures on the like clothes. And so it was like, okay, like They just picked out like 10 pictures and had me like make small changes to them. And then it kind of just went into this like black box of like, okay, cool. Well, we'll let you know what we use. So I was kind of trying to like ping them, and I was dealing directly with like Louis Vuitton. This is not through
That's
like an agency.
crazy.
But the person I didn't realize how high up the person I was. That this person was just directly under the creative director for the entire women's
That's
line.
crazy.
And so I just thought the entire time that this was just some kid who's like, let's put some Beeple stuff on clothes. And it's like, okay, they're not going to use this, especially because they picked a bunch of like robots and weird stuff where it's like, you're going to put a robot on like a $3,000 women's dress. Like, what? Like, you're not going to do that. And so, when they did end up using it, and we ended up going to the like show at the Louvre, and it's like, even then, like I had no idea what they used. And they told me like, oh yeah, we're using it. And I was like, okay, again, like, are you just the kid who's like, no, we're going to use it? And then the creative director is going to be like, okay, we're not using this. What are you talking about? We went to the show, and it was like first person came out, and it's like there's the thing on the shirt. It's like, oh my god, they used it. And then it's like second person, third person, fourth, fifth. It's like, oh my god, they used all of it just like they said they were gonna. So it was just like freaking out. Like it was just like super super cool to see. Like I will never forget that. It was just like insane to like see it on the clothes, and it was just like just like put on like the front of the clothes. Like it wasn't like, oh, here's like, in the inner lining of the like shoe, like here's a picture. It was just like, boom, there's the picture on the front. It was just like, oh my God, like, yeah, it was super, super like surreal.
Yeah,
to
that's
see.
awesome. I think that's incredible because it's not something that you would think could happen to like someone in our industry.
No.
You'd be like, what?
No, this like never remotely was just like, it'd be cool if like a high-end luxury fashion brand decided to put this JPEG on a shirt. Like what? On women's clothing? Like what? No. And it's like, and I've never like done it wasn't like there was anything that like kind of like led up to
Right.
this. Like it wasn't like, oh well, I did something for this smaller brand and then they saw it and then blah blah blah. It's like boom, no, it's like they're the like best slot at like Paris Fashion Week, like the end of like the Paris Fashion Week, like the biggest brand. It's just like, wow, this is like so like out of left field.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I kind of want to ask you about the licensing stuff and things like that. I know it might be a bit tricky, but you can say as much as you want or not, I guess. But like, I'm assuming you did some sort of licensing thing with them, or was it based on like, are they selling those things or like how?
Oh yeah, they're selling them. Yeah, you can go on, and some of them. There was one that they're selling. See if I can find this picture. I'm pretty sure it's a dress, and it is like $20,000. One dress. Yeah, no, it's the like ready to wear collection, so you can go into like any sort of Louis Vuitton and see all different.
You can see
stuff.
all of your work on the clothes. That's crazy.
Yeah, here's one that's like $7,500. Yeah, they're definitely $3,700. Pretty expensive. It was just like in terms of the like fee, it was just like a flat like buyout of the work to like use for promotion and the clothing or whatever. So I do not get any percentage of sale. And to be honest, it wasn't like a huge amount of money. It was a lot of money for how much work I had to do because honestly, I had to make very small changes to these pictures. For the amount of work that I had to do, it was like really, really good money. But in terms of like, okay, you're going to sell this for like $10,000 dress, like it's not that much money.
Really? That's interesting.
Well, and that's where I think a lot of people are like, I think people have somewhat of a tendency to overvalue their work in our industry. And I think if Louis Vuitton would have came to me and said, will you do this? We're not paying you anything. I think there's a lot of people who would have told them to go themselves and be like, no, you're not using my art for free. And I absolutely 100% would have said yes. I would have pushed back and been like, come on, guys, nothing. I would have pushed back a bunch of times. But if in the end they were just like, nope, we either use it for free or we don't use it, I would have been like, absolutely 100% use it. One, just because I think it's freaking cool. Two, because it's like, it's good for me, like that promotion of like being on that like brand. Like that's good for me. Like I don't gain anything by telling them no. It's not going to make my career or my life any better by them walking away and using somebody else's. And to be honest, it's not going to hurt them either because nobody's spending $10,000 on a dress because it's my artwork. They're doing that because it's Louis Vuitton, because it's a brand that's been around 150 years and they've built up this value. It has nothing to do with mine. They could have put anything on it and it would have still been sold for $10,000. I could go out and sell a t-shirt. Do you think I could sell a t-shirt that's my t-shirt for $10,000?
No,
No,
but
absolutely
yeah.
not. But that's where I think people have a tendency to like not recognize the value of their work versus some of these brands and what they're being used for. It's sort of like they have the like power in that thing. Just because they should pay, it's like, well, they've spent all this money and time and resources to build a brand to that value where they could put anything on it. It doesn't matter. Nobody's buying it because of Beeple. Nobody's buying it because of Beeple. I can't stress that enough. People shooting themselves in the foot to be like, oh, this is, devaluing my work. It's not devaluing your work. Your work it is what it is. Like my work, if I would have told them no, doesn't make my work more popular or more valuable. If I would have said, no, you can't use this for free, how would my work gotten more valuable? It would not have gotten more valuable. If anything, it's less valuable because less people know about it and have seen it. You hear a lot about exposure bucks and people, I can't pay. Like exposure is a real currency and it doesn't work in the way that a lot of people, I think it works, but it definitely has value. I think you need to make sure that if you're doing something for exposure, that you understand who's going to gain the exposure and that it's valuable like to you and not just the person who's like using the work. You know what I mean? Like that it's exposure. And another thing, like a good example of this is like the Super Bowl. The person who plays the Super Bowl makes $0. Beyonce worked for no money. Prince, no money. Michael Jackson, no money. At the height of their careers, they were asked to do this gig, and they said, you know what? We're not going to pay you a dime. And they said, okay. Was that stupid of them?
Yeah, I feel like the argument to this, I just feel like I want to give the other side too, is I think that you're right.
Yeah,
No,
I would love to hear the other
but
side.
I think a lot of people will listen to this and say, yeah, but you're Beeple and that's Louis Vuitton. Like that is different because like that is such a big brand.
But don't you think a lot of people in my position, if a brand like that came to them and said, we're not going to pay you anything, what do you think they would say?
Maybe would say no. I'm just saying because I think that the offer of exposure from most brands or companies or people isn't worth it.
That I 100% agree with. I 100% agree. You need to understand if it's actually worth it and what you're going to get with it. Because most of the time, they'll say it's worth something and it's not worth something. That I 100% agree with. But there are times where it is worth something. Understanding when those times are. But yes, most of the time, a lot of times, companies will try to trick you and act like this exposure is worth something. And it really just benefits them and you will get nothing from it. So it's understanding those times when that's not the case.
Yeah.
And taking those opportunities and not having this pride of like, oh, my work is super valuable. And like, how dare you try and like say it should be free and like shooting yourself in the foot. But yes, most of the times companies will try and trick you and act like this is going to be great for you. And it's like, that's not going to get you anything. Those you should absolutely 100% turn down. It's understanding the difference between the things that are actually good exposure and the things that are like just bull.
Yeah, so what if Louis Vuitton came to you and you had to work a bunch? Like you had to do a lot of work. They wanted like new stuff. Do you feel like it's different then?
Then it would, yes, 100%. If they're like, okay, we want you to work for like 3 months, then it's like, okay, guys, well, this is really like, then, it changes. And that's where there's no easy answer. If they were like, yes, you have to do a bunch of work, then it really definitely would have been like, I don't know about this. Like, because again, I don't know if they're going to use it. I don't know, like, in that situation, I really didn't think they were going to use it. So if they would have came to me and been like, we want you to do a bunch of work
Yeah.
for free. And it's like, no, we're going to use it. It's like, I have no guarantee you're going to use it. I could put in all this time. That's where it would have been like, maybe I'll give you a little time, but I'm not going to like just sit here and spend like a ridiculous amount of time hoping that this happens. Because again, I don't know how you're going to use it too. If it could have been the lining of the shoe or something where it's like, can't even see my work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where it's like, there are no easy answers. So to say you should never do something for free, I don't think that's true. You should look at the scenario and think about it. But to say that like anytime like exposure is always just like a bullshit form of payment, I think that's equally as like not true.
I think there's definitely like gauges on everything. And like the example that you give, that could be worth it to some people. But I think it is as well, is like building up a body of personal work that you could license to other people. I think that's like a smart thing, the work that you actually own, like rather than client work, because at the end of the day, you can only get paid once for client work, really, unless they're going to like take the illustrations out and they're going to use it for something else out of an animation or whatever. You know, I think like having personal work that you make, you could like sell a license to multiple people if you give them like a non-exclusive license or whatever, you know. So I think that's like another thing to mention, I guess.
I think, yeah, I think that is another benefit of doing everydays is it does give you a body of work that could be licensed. I think a lot of people with the everydays misunderstand, at least in my mind, the purpose of the everydays is just to practice to get better. It really is not about the picture or the Instagram. Those things are benefits for sure. They're absolutely benefits. But to me, it's just about the main driver is the like practice getting better. And that I think like if you're constantly worried about getting better, like if that's the thing you're mainly worried about, and that's the thing I worry most about is getting better or sucking. Like that's what I worry about. That I think all the other things will they'll fall into place.
Do you think that's like why you've been so successful? Because you're not kind of chasing it, you're almost just kind of chasing.
I'm chasing not sucking. That's what I'm constantly chasing. Like last night, the picture I did, and I would say almost most nights, it's like I walk away and I'm just like, that is just garbage. Last night, it's like walked away, spent like a decent amount of time, and it was just like, oh, that did not turn out like how I wanted it to turn out, and just felt like it was like garbage. And so I think worrying about sucking like is important. I don't know. I don't have a good way of saying that. That doesn't seem like a very good quote. Worrying about sucking is important. That's literally the worst quote or advice anybody's
No,
ever
I just think it's like super interesting because you have like what, like 640,000 followers on Instagram or something. It's just quite eye-opening to me that your main pursuit is like not sucking.
Now, that's definitely the main thing I worry about is not being good, and not that I'm not being good. Like that doesn't apply that I'm good now. That I
Right.
feel like I'm good. It's like, obviously I'm much better than when I started. Like I fully see that, and that's why I continue to do this because I do see improvement. But I also look at like a ton of other people's work, and it's like, wow, that is like 1,000 times better than like what I could do, and like so there's no remote shortage of people whose work that I look at and just makes me feel like absolute crap because it's like so much better on like a technical level, color, composition. Like, I mean, there's plenty of like things that I can view to make myself feel shitty about myself.
Yeah, well, I would recommend not viewing them as much. Like that's what I do.
Well, and honestly, I feel like I feel like that again. I feel like the theme of this podcast is balance, so that there's no easy answer because I feel like there's a balance of that in terms of like looking at people's work to feel inspired and to like get ideas or to like study their work to sort of like push yourself forward. But then it goes into like social media and looking at people's work, and then it just makes you feel like and it's just like this downer like, and I totally get like both sides of that. Like there's a point where it's like, okay, this is not helping anymore, And like then you really need to like kind of like, okay, let's see his back, close fucking Instagram, close whatever. Like this isn't helping
Yeah,
anymore.
definitely.
So it's a balance between those two. And I fully like still get into like, okay, I need to stop looking at this because it's just like freaking, it's not putting me in a good place.
I think it is like a problem, people looking at other people's work and like comparing themselves and all of that kind of thing.
I 100% do that. And it's like a problem that I take active steps to sort of mitigate and that I like struggle with too. So it's like, this isn't a problem that I'm not sure it ever goes away. At least it hasn't gone away for me. So
yeah, so I've got a few questions from the community, and one that kind of links into this a bit, I think, is one from Sammy Van Dyken. He basically said that he sees a lot of good artists that bring unique ideas and visuals, but not succeed in their social media, but then other artists that maybe like follow trends and stuff like that. He was just wondering, like, how much social media marketing comes into it, following trends and trying to fit in, and kind of what your thoughts on that are, basically. Yeah, I guess he's asking about like trends, like following trends and making work like the people that you know people want to see, or like following your own style or what you feel like is inside of you, even if it's not like the cool thing to post or whatever.
I think you definitely need to follow like what's inside of you, what you want to do, because you're not, if you're just like following, and I'm not trying to say that as like you gotta be an artist. Like I think it needs to be something that it's like if it doesn't resonate with you, you'll just stop doing it. Like if it's not fun and you just feel like you're just going through the motions to go with this like trend or whatever, like it's not something that you're gonna be able to like I think get that excited about. And if your only metric of whether this is good or bad is like how popular it is on social media, that's another like sort of like empty thing. It's not really gonna ever like fulfill you. Like when I feel like fulfilled as an artist, it's when I do something and I know I tried really hard on it and it like turned out like good and I like it. Like that's when it's like, okay, this is like that's when I feel the best and get the most like actual enjoyment. And that's not to say I'm human. I want people to like my work. Like I'm not trying to like act like I'm this cool artist who's I don't care if anybody likes it. Of course I want people to like it. Like I think you need to like push on what you like because that's what you will put the most like energy and time with and stick with because it's like you have that passion and you have that interest. I just don't think like I think that's very temporary. And I think like worrying about like what other people are doing or this or that, like, I don't know, if you keep pushing in that direction that you are super passionate about, I think it will eventually like bear fruit versus trying to do some flavor of the month, flavor of the whatever. I don't think that will be successful. And I think a lot of these things, like people looking at like, oh, this person on social media, blah, blah, blah. It's like social media has only been around for like a few years. So it's like, I think people a lot of times too, a lot of the issues with people is they're not taking a like career. They're not looking at their whole career. They're looking at like 2 years or they're looking at like, they're not looking at like, okay, are you going to be in this industry for 30 years? Are you going to be in this industry for 40 years if you're 20? Look at it like that. Don't look at it like, okay, in the next 2 months, what am I going to like do to like get a bunch of likes or get a blah, blah, blah. Like that's where I think focusing on trying to be better is going to be a lot more sustaining and long term going to get you to where you want than like focusing on how many likes something has.
Yeah, that makes sense. That kind of plays into what we were talking about earlier too, about like chasing the money, and like if you're thinking like more long term, you're not really thinking about, oh my god, I need this job because I need money right now, and all of that kind of stuff. You're thinking, well, I want to make work that's my own.
It's not even that. Like, I want to make a bunch of money. Like, I definitely want to make a shitload of money. But I think, like, if you're worrying more about getting better, eventually the money will come.
Yeah.
I think, like, it will come because of your skill set. Like, you will have no problem finding jobs. You'll have no problem, blah, blah, blah. Like, if you're really good and nobody knows about you, you'll still be able to get booked because you'll go into a place and you'll just absolutely crush it and be like, holy shit, okay, well, we could fire 3 guys and just have Bill in here and he's going to, like, crush it. Like, so people will recognize really quick, like if you are like super good.
Yeah, that's true. Zachary Blaze was asking, what do you think about having a style then? Does it limit you or do you feel like it might get boring?
Yeah, that's where again I think people worry about not putting out any work. Don't worry about what the work you're doing. Do whatever you think is the best and the style will be what it is, and it's like I don't know, like I don't think about like what is my style? How can I do blah blah blah. It's like I'm 100% thinking like just putting out work and trying to be like the best whatever, and if it's something that if I do the same thing for a while, like then that's what it is, and if I like change it then it changes to something else. But I think like worrying about like what your style is or trying to like I don't know, like that's just not something I like worry about. Like I think people are too worried about like trying to define what their style is or trying to do that. Worry about not putting out work. Like worry about your skill set, your technical skill set versus style or anything like that, because that's going to change. Like as you put out stuff, you'll get bored with what you're putting out and you'll put out different stuff. So I don't know, it's just not something I would spend too much time worrying about.
Diego Benel asked, what did you give up in your life in order to have time for your everydays?
Spending time with friends.
Dan Latif asked, how do you motivate yourself even when it seems like you might break a streak? You've never broken a streak, so
It doesn't seem like that. Once you have that momentum, you will keep going. There's no the momentum of how many days you've done it will carry you forward. You don't have to like it will become less and less of a choice. So there is no like thought of like, you know what, I've done it every single day for the last 12 years, but I really want to watch Game of Thrones tonight, so it. Like you're not gonna do that. The momentum of the project will help make it feel like less and less of a choice.
I'm just curious, do you like keep counting some way or like tick it off or have something to like make sure you do it? Like, or is it just in your mind all the time?
It's just in my mind, like getting up and like it's in my mind like days ahead too. Traveling that day, when am I gonna do it? Making sure that like if I'll do it like before I get on an airplane almost always, because I don't know if like I'm gonna go through security and they're gonna take my computer, whatever, So things like that. I'm always constantly thinking about what could be a weird situation that could arise that would prevent me from doing it and trying to mitigate that.
But do you not like, because if it was me, I would like try and batch them. Like I'm doing 2 podcasts today.
No, that's not the point. Like the point is it's every single day. Because then if you get busy, then it's like, okay, well, I don't have time to batch like 10 of them. The whole point is like just trying to like learn something and stick with it every single day.
Right.
Because I feel like it's easier to stick with if it's like super binary like that. Just one, and there's no excuse. Like if you get really busy, like how much time are you going to spend on this podcast today? Like 4 hours, 5 hours, or something like that. Like you're going to spend a ton of time.
Yeah.
So if you get busy, then it's like I don't really have 5 hours to spend on this, and then maybe I'll do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's why I'm batching them so that I don't have to worry about that because I already have them recorded like in advance. So I can see why you're doing your every day because that's why you're doing it, if that makes sense, because you're doing it to learn. I'm not doing the podcast to learn so I can batch them and like
Sure.
have them ready months in advance,
Again, this is where I think there's no right answer. Like if you can stick with it, to me, I couldn't stick with it if I was doing like 5. And to me, that's just not like, it would be really hard to like bang out like 5 in a day, because it's sort of like, I just don't have that many original ideas in one day. Not that they're all like the most, amazingly original idea, but it would be like really hard. Like I feel like I can barely do 1 a day versus like doing like 10 a day. The way I'm doing it is, if you could do that and you could stick with it, I think it would make it harder to stick with it. But I know people who do it every day and they do it like that. So
Graham Bucknell asked, what's the hardest thing you learned while being a freelancer?
How to quote projects, I guess. I'm still struggling with how to quote projects. So I guess that's something I'm still learning.
Yeah. So Anwar McWhite just said, can you describe a day in the life of Beeple?
Get up, work, eat with the kids. The kids are kind of constantly in and out. This is actually shocking that they haven't come bursting in. Work in the afternoon, eat supper, do something with the kids for a couple hours, and then work. That's pretty much every day. And then usually we'll maybe watch like a half hour episode of something at night and go to bed.
How many hours are you spending on your everydays normally?
Usually I would say it's roughly around 2 as like an average. It can go up and down depending on how much motivation, how much time I have. So yeah, it can go up and down in terms of that. But yeah.
Vishal asks, do you create some sort of template or have a specific workflow when it comes to your everydays?
I have a workflow, but it's changed drastically over the last 12 years as I've changed the type of work. Like it used to be way more abstract and sort of geometric in a way. And now it's much more trying to focus on something that's narrative and trying to like tell a story. So the workflow, I have a rough workflow, but yeah, it's definitely changed over the years.
Cool. Ash Bees Mahun? Yeah, so he was asking about like, do you use any tools like to post on Instagram or anything like Hootsuite and things like that?
No, I don't, because when you use those tools, the algorithm sees that you're using automated tools to like push it out to a bunch of places at once and it will ding you. It will show it to less people. And I had that,
Really?
yes, I had that theory for a long time. There's a million factors in the algorithm and nobody knows what it is and they're changing as people try and game it. And I had that idea I had that notion for a long time that it was like, I bet that if you use it, it realizes it's not special to their platform and that it will ding you. And I asked like a year ago or a little over a year ago, asked a social media manager at Adobe if that was true. He's like, yeah, it's true. I'm like, I knew it. So yeah, if you post something through one of those aggregators and it pushes it out to all of them, some percentage it will ding it, some percentage less. It's not like 50% less, but it is some percentage less that it will show it versus if you natively post it in each one of those apps separately.
Yeah, but because you're talking about like when you have something that will like post the same things, but like we use later.com for motion hatch stuff, and that's like an Instagram posting app. So I wonder about that. I mean, maybe it still does.
It is. I can almost guarantee you that it's sending it to less people because you're using a third party app and that it's not like, but the reason I thought that is because it's a little more like spammy. And what
Right.
Instagram and all those, they want the most engaging things that they think people will want to see. And so if you're using like something like that, it's a little bit more of like a marketing tool and they think, oh, this is just some marketing crap. Probably people don't want to see it as much as other things. They're going to show it to people inherently less because they recognize that it's coming from a company and it's probably not some super weird one-off viral thing that's going to be really engaging.
That makes sense. I think I'm going to do an experiment. I might like post some of your work or something when this comes out and then
Post it both ways. And that's the thing.
like do
it would
one
be
in the app and then do one from later.com or something.
it would be very hard to do that definitively because again, there's a million different variables. So this is like that's why I knew that guy would know because he's like works in that industry doing social media like marketing or whatever. But trying to test this out yourself would be very hard because the time of day you post, if you posted the same thing twice, it's not going to get as much engagement. Like there's a million factors. And then there's just randomly like how many people like it within the first like 20 minutes, half hour, something like that. Like that has a big factor. So there's so many factors that this is something that would be hard to test yourself. But if you did like, if you're a big company and you could spam out a million things to like really test this, like they've proven it.
I just wonder like, because I know with some of the apps as well, you can push it to your phone and then you can post it natively. So maybe that's like somewhat of an answer. Do you know what I mean? Like to remind you.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. Don't get me wrong. It's a fucking pain in the ass because I post every day to Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, my site, Instagram, and for a while I was doing social media too. And then once in a while I'll post to ArtStation and Behance. Yeah, trust me, I know it's a huge pain in the ass, but
yeah, that's crazy. Do you feel like it would be better to focus on one platform? What is your kind of
no, because I think you don't really know. I've usually been a bit slower to like get on platforms than I should, but you don't know what's going to be. Like I didn't know I would never have thought Instagram was gonna like blow up, because to me it's like the absolute worst place to look at pictures. You can't zoom in, you can't like there's a million things about it. Like it's on white background, which like makes everything like it's all blown out. That's, you can't like make a dark version. There's a million things about it that it's like, and for a while you couldn't choose the aspect ratio. I mean, you still can't. You've got three choices, but for the longest time it was like, not square, go yourself, like square. Like I would have never have guessed that. So I think don't try and like predict the future. Just spam it out to just about everything.
I think it's just like, if you are, in my head, like if you are gonna like put work out a lot and then you're not gonna use one of these kind of posting tools, I would be tempted to like just concentrate on one, at least for a while, to see if that worked.
In the scope of how long it takes to make the everyday versus posting it, like, yeah, it's a pain, but it's like, it takes me like 2 minutes to post it versus like I spent 2 hours on this. So it's really not that much time when you factor in the amount of like time you spent actually making the content.
In terms of, do you get a lot of messages and stuff on Instagram? Anything from like companies? And I don't know, like, because you've got quite a big account. I just wondered like how frequent you get like stuff.
Yeah, and I'm really, really bad. I almost never check the messages on Instagram. So if you're trying to contact me through Instagram, like I'm not seeing it. Email me. And that's actually how Louis Vuitton tried to contact me. I didn't see it. I saw it much later, just by chance, kind of. That's how they initially tried to contact me, and I completely missed it. And luckily, they emailed me. Yeah, if you're trying to get somebody's attention, like I would not. I mean, if that's your only choice, like do that, but recognize that there's probably a very good chance they're not going to see it.
Yeah, if they have a big account. So I just wanted you to say, like, if people don't know where to find you, where can they find you and your work?
If you just type Beeple into Google, you'll find a shocking number of places that I'm constantly posting garbage on.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, that's not like an underestimation or anything. So, like, on Instagram and all of the places, basically.
Anywhere you can see something on the internet, I've infected it with my posts. So I would say you're probably going to have a harder time not seeing my work on the internet than finding it, because I post it so many places, because I've spammed every site.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was super good to talk. A very interesting mix of the topic that I think people don't talk about enough. So yeah, definitely thanks for having me.
Well, that was an awesome episode. Thanks again to Mike for coming on the show. Do let us know if you enjoyed this episode. We are at Motion Hatch on Twitter and Instagram. We have a ton of fantastic episodes coming up for you. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And let's get this show to 100 episodes. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. I appreciate you. See ya.